Right, it's all cold, proper cold to the touch. Obviously that will be because I haven't even welded that bit. And I've checked the measurements with it still clamped in, and then obviously everything's as it was. I mean, it can still pull even in the jig. That's why I wanted to check the measurements before I undid the clamps. But the measurements were spot on. So I'm going to turn it over, take the clamps off, and we'll measure it again. Also, one thing I meant to say yesterday, and I forgot, on this side, when I've put this bar in, I welded it on that side first, and I never even noticed that it wasn't touching the swing arm. But thankfully, when I measured it, it was exactly 3mm off the swing arm. So an added piece of 3mm flat bar made it all back, like, so it would be level. As in, before I cut it, the 3mm went in, it was tight. So luckily it worked out well, because I wouldn't have to cut it off again and pull it up properly. God knows what I was thinking of when I put it on. But obviously I wasn't thinking of that. Right, take the clamp off. Right. I don't know if you can see in the camera. I'll zoom it in a little bit. Can't even see where the thing is at. You see where my finger is there? That's the inch block that went in as the spacer, and just on top of it is a piece of 3mm aluminium. Now that 3mm aluminium was a nice tight fit before I actually cut the swing arm. So basically the 25mm spacer still means that it's spaced out correctly on that side. But yeah, just thought I'd point that out anyways, just in case anyone noticed it and wondered what the crack was. I made a bit of a boo-boo, so to speak, when I was putting the jig. As I say, this side, this bar, for some reason had actually dropped, and I don't know why. Just lack of concentration. Right, that's the clamps off. Spacers are still tight. That's loose, which is good. But what I'll do, if I can find where I put it, I just had it a minute ago. Right, I've lost the tape measure. Here she is. Right, and I know the exact points that, I'll take that earth off as well. I know the exact points where I measured it, and I've measured at them exact points every time. So on this back bit here, where on the inside of the swing arm, where the like your wheel spacers sit against, it's slightly raised. But what I've measured off is right on the end where it isn't raised. So that by rights should be, if I get my book with my measurements on, even though I know what they are. I took measurements at the points. So, point at wheel, before it was cut, was 310mm, and now it'll be 335. And that is, I'm trying to bring it up. Turn it so zoom in a bit. I don't know how well you'll be able to see the tape, like, but right. So stick the bottom on, the end of the tape on the bottom, and as you can see there, that's exactly bang on the button, 335. Zoom you back out. So the end measurement's correct. Now this measurement, it's pointless bringing you in to show you it. If I can, I will. But the way it's measured is from a certain direction, from that way on. So it's measured with the end of the tape on the top, and I used these welded areas, so I was just off the welds, so to speak. And it was actually on the tube, is what I'm trying to say, not on the welded bit. So I'll put that under there. And that is exactly 335. Now on the other end, on the other side you can say, it was measured from the bottom rail up to the top rail, but the tape was touching these brace bars. So into position where it was, and then look down. Now the bottom should be 325, and it is exactly 325, because for some reason, when I explained earlier about how the jig wasn't in line, it was in line, everything was square and stuff, as in it wasn't in line where everything fastens on, but normally with swing arms, the top rail's going down and the bottom rail's coming up, they're usually in line, but this one wasn't. So whoever's made it originally has made it come in at the bottom, like exaggerating it, sort of like that. So it's 10mm narrower here, and it's not on the curve neither, it's on the straight, but it's 10mm narrower on the bottom part here than it is on the top side. But it didn't matter, because at the end of the day, as long as it was 25mm wider, that's all that mattered. So I just need to knock that spacer out. Also, on the weld, on here, I've welded it, put a root run in to start with on the front and back of this plate. Bear in mind this is 1/2 inch plate. But then, it's hard to explain, as I was welding it on the capping run, I sort of did a few stitches and then went back on myself and just laid some steel on the top with the filler rod. So I've actually built that weld up. The top layer of weld that I put on has nothing to do with the strength of the weld. It was just to build it up. So that what I'm going to do with all this is I'm going to grind the corners off. Like, I'll just zoom in a little bit. And just change the angle. Right. I'm going to grind these corners off so that they're round, but I'm also going to grind them that way. Not massively, I'm not going to like cut it off at an angle across there, I'm just going to round the corners off so it's not just a square block you're looking at. But then I'm going to sort of round these bits off a bit as well, just ever so slightly, which will catch this weld as well, which will just smooth that up a bit more, and the same on the inside. And as I say, the steel that I just laid on, the filler wire that I laid on the top, was not, in a sense, you could say it's got like 3 rows of weld. It's got a root run, and then it's got a capping sort of filler run sort of thing, not a proper capping run, but then I just laid that on the top. So that's just sort of, for lack of a better way of putting it, that's like a sacrificial weld that I know I'm going to grind off without affecting the strength of the weld. The welds underneath were the ones with the strength in. And then obviously on this bit here, all this will be getting sort of rounded off and tidied up. So, and on the top it's pretty much just a case of just make sure there's no sharp bits, because sometimes when you're welding, if you can get a sharp bit sticking out your weld if you've dipped your rod into it by accident. It doesn't feel as if there's out major on it. But so far everything's looking good. as in it's all in line, the measurements are correct. So what I'm going to do now is I'll knock you off. I'm not going to film cutting the jig to bits, but I'll knock you off and I'll come back once I've got the jig out and I'll check the measurements again, and I'll be able to see where I measured because of there'll be a weld where this side was welded on. I know where I've measured it on that side, so I don't need a mark, and I know that it's measured right at the back end. So right, for now I'll knock you off and I'll get this jig taken out, cut to bits, and then I'll come back. Right, got the jig all stripped out of it, checked my measurements, still absolutely spot on. What I've just been doing is I've put the new axle in through the back. I've put an old axle shaft in. That's not the old one off this is an old one off another bike. This one's got a problem. But I've just put it in. And what I've done is I've put the level on the top and spaced it up so that the swing arm, because that table's not level that it's sitting on, but I've spaced it up so the swing arm's sitting level. Bubbles right in the middle. Put it in the middle of the bar at the back. Bubbles right in the middle, and then when you sit it on the axle shaft, bubbles right in the middle. So that means that the swing arm hasn't twisted like that while it was being welded. Everything's sort of level, so that's absolutely spot on. And as I say, the measurements worked out perfect. So as a whole, it's been a success. Not that I would have expected anything else really. I mean, yeah, they can twist, they can bend, but if you know, I mean, it's what I do for a living, welding engineer, so I sort of know if it's twisted or bent, I know how to get it back into shape anyways, so. But when I was on about this bottom, now I'm going to grind it all up and I put a bit extra weld on and stuff, so when it's all cleaned off, it's smoother. I've done exactly the same, just on that one bit. The rest of that I won't be touching weld-wise on this top bit, and I won't be touching any of that weld-wise. But I did build it up a touch on that weld there, just so I can flush that off, so it's smooth, same as that side. So, but apart from that one bit there, none of that top part will get touched. I just need to now clean off where there was tacks on the swing arm. So I'll take them down so far with like a flat disc. Just a 3M sanding disc sort of thing. I'll take them down so far and then I file it. I don't try and take it down all the way with one of them, but then file it off so it's all nice and smooth. Same with all these ones. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 welds to clean off on the frame, on the swing arm. So, and then I'll put that to one side. I'll do it off camera obviously. I'll put that to one side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill the holes in the wheel spacer so that I can get all the back wheel built up, and then we can actually put the back wheel into the swing arm, bolt it up properly with all its new spacers and that, make sure it's correct, and then basically it's a case of working out on the bottom part of here. I need like a sort of a support stop, I don't know what you want to call it, but on the caliper bracket there's a slot in there, which I'll just use a piece of angle as an example. But when you put your wheel into your swing arm, it goes into there, and you adjust your little screw up so it's like snug, and it stops your brackets trying to spin when you're braking. Well, I need to, once I've got all the wheeling and got it all lined up, I need to work out what I'm going to do bracket wise to hook the caliper bracket. So for now I'll knock you off and get this swing arm cleaned up, and put it to one side. And as I say, I'll get this other stuff done and then I'll come back. Right, I've just cleaned up where the welds were on the swing arm, just thought I'd give it a quick. I've also flashed that top bit off so it's smooth like that side is. I've also ground this bit off so it's like rounded. But basically I haven't took any structural strength as such away from it, it's just like the corner that's gone on the top and bottom, just to give it that more rounded profile so it doesn't just stand out as a square block. The inside, all I've done is took the just right tip of the sharp corners off that was on the block, and just give it a quick sort of a flash up sort of thing. But until I come to put this brace on for the caliper, that's it now for the swing arm. So now I'm going to get them the disc spacer drilled out and that, and then come back when we can put the wheel in and see how it's going to line up, etc. Back soon. Right, I've drilled the spacer to suit the bolt pattern. So I'll get the disc fitted on. This is just mock up as well. This I'm going to be polishing this so it sort of at least looks somewhat like the hub. I'm just going to use the standard disc for mock-up, and I'm just going to use the standard length bolts. As I say, it's all going to have to come to bits again anyways to get, like this needs polished, as I say, the spacer, and also the two new spacers that I made for the to go on the axle, with it being a wider swing arm, they need polished as well. But what I'm doing now, well obviously I'm fitting a disc now, but what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to set it up in the swing arm on this table. So I can see about where to put the support, I don't know what you'd call it, like a stop that the caliper bracket sort of goes on. So that's doesn't need to be super tight. It's not going to. It might move a thousandth of an inch when I tighten it down properly. Another good thing about this, with this conversion that I've done, if that's how you want to put it, I can actually get my caliper on and off without having to take the disc off the wheel. So it means I can put some low strength Loctite on the bolts so that there's definitely no chance of them coming loose. Right, so what I need is a new axle. I just put these nuts on the end just to protect the threads. They're not going to be used on the job, they're just, as I say, just solely to protect the threads. Right, I ratchet some bits out. So that's off one side, and now I don't know what I've done with the stuff off the other side. Swing arm. Right, I'll just stand this wheel up. Swing arm in here. Make sure I'm putting the wheel in the right way around. Right, first things first, that spacer needs to go in there. So what I might do is actually shove the shaft through from this side. Right, so I'll try and... I mean, the side you've just seen me putting in, that's not been modified obviously. So just turn this slightly, because now this is where the moment of truth comes in, if my calculations have been correct. Put that spacer in there. Oh. Bit awkward when it's not fastened to the bike and trying to hold the wheel up and the swing arm. Let's put that bit in. Right, struggling here to hold the bloody thing up. Right, I'm just going to knock you off a sec. I'm going to try and get this swing arm supported so it stays still. I'm back in a minute. Right, I got it where the axle was sort of sitting and wouldn't fall over, and then carried on and forgot to put the camera on. But I've got the shaft through, I've got the nut and bolt on the other side, so it's up sort of against that bit on the other side, and I was just going to put this on when I looked at the camera and seen that it was black, and that's when I realised I forgot to put the camera on. Now on the other side I've used the original one of them that came off the bike to start with, because obviously the one that's on the bike is part of the side mount number plate, so I can't take that off. Well, I can, but it means taking the wiring off. So I'm just using this as a spacer sort of thing. And obviously, as I said earlier, I'm using the original nuts that came off the bike. So let's grab a couple of spanners and just give it a quick tighten up. Make sure it spins freely. Right, now what also I should be able to not do, because it's the wheel that turns and not the shaft, so I'll just slacken this back off. Bit of a blonde moment then. Right, I'll just stop that for now. Caliper. Right, I'll just bolt the caliper in place, and the good thing about this is I can take it on and off, as I've already said, without having to take the disc off. and this time it's definitely not going to hit the swing arm, because it's I could actually, well, I'll show you in a second. I can actually rotate the whole it's ever so slightly warped, that disc. But it'll do. But what I can do now is I can like centralise. I'm just going to get behind the camera so I can see if that's in the centre where I want it. I think that'll sort of do it, that. Just take it back a touch. No, a little bit more. I'm just going to put my head in front of the camera because I want to be lining this up. Right, that will do it, that. And I'll just nick this back up. And as you can see, that's spinning freely. And I know that the caliper, sorry, the wheels, it's, if you imagine, would be at its slackest point, because it's right at this end of the thing. But even when it's up, if it was to pull all the way up, the caliper's not going to touch. I mean, if I can find something I can use, as an example, I'll just use this file. I can actually put my file in there and bring it up. That's the clearance that I've got between the swing, well, more than that. So I'm able to move it up and down, like if it was on the bike, it would be moving it backwards and forwards without actually touching the swing arm, which it was before. So, quite happy with that. All I need to do now is work out what I want for to go into this caliper. I've got, there was one that I made originally to bolt on with, you know, that fucking worked brilliant as well if it lined up. Now then, what movement have I got in that? If we were to say something about there, say I've probably got 1.5 inches of movement in that shaft. And I think that that's 2¼ inches long. If I could get that to line up in there, and then just if I put that there, So that's one thing with the bottom of this swing arm. It shows up to me there that the bottom of the swing arm's actually going out the way, narrower at this end than it is at that end on the bottom. If you remember earlier with the measurements I was on about, this bottom bit was 10mm narrower than the top bit, which means that the bottom bit's actually tapering out the way up to this point. Well, when I'm looking at this bracket, it's actually closer at this end than it is at that end. So, do I just move that up? See, I want it so it stays on where the lock bolt screw is on the caliper bracket, and bring it in a touch. Yeah, so I'm going to have to work on that and have a weigh up what's best, whether to sort of modify that so it fits. Because I could actually brace it. If I was to cut this bracket off, which is the bracket that was on the original, I don't know where the original bit is. Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure where the original bracket is, but I have got other bits. Yeah, I've got a bit of bar left that would fit nicely into that. Ooh. I mean, it'd obviously need cut to suit, and then I could actually weld it on. I was just looking down at the gap between the pads and the disc. The pads are fully pushed out in, or should I say fully pushed in, if depending on how you want to view it. I was just looking at the gap either side of the disc, and it's basically it looks the same. If you put feeler gauges in there might be a couple of thou difference, but right. So I'm going to knock you off for now while I have a weigh up of what I'm going to do with this bit. And then I'll come back when I've made a decision as to what's going to happen. But so far everything's working out how I want it. So, cool. Right, back soon.